The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam and I want to make self-growth normal because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. I'm approaching this review from the same place I approached Matthew McConaughey's autobiography and Seth Rogen's or James Taylor's or even Billie Eilish's. I probably lived most of my childhood avoiding popular culture, living under a rock. Hopefully this can be a little bit different from other reviews. The point is, it's easy for me at least to listen to these audiobooks not knowing the full background or much of it at all of the autobiographer, gaining whatever insights I can. It's never really clear to me whether this person writes for their they write this for their fans, for people who haven't listened to their music or watched their movies. So it's always a fun review and I almost always enjoy listening to what I hear. One of the things that drew me to it is that it got like strikingly positive reviews. Dave Grohl always seemed like a very sincere guy. So let me tell you something about Dave Grohl. He is. He began by talking about his first given and last taken drum lesson by a jazz drummer. And his first given lesson was to his 8-year-old daughter. And those two lessons were so different from each other. And then he started talking about DNA. He said about DNA that, "I believe these musical impulses aren't so much a mystery as predetermined, residing deep within a DNA strand. DNA is a miraculous thing. We all carry traits of people we've never met deep within our chemistry." The first woman he saw who made his heart sing, or I guess beat, right? Because it's like a drummer. I don't know. Hard to beat anyway. Maybe like a heart kick or crash. Like the symbol. I don't know. The way he described her appearance, I'd never heard before. I mean, there are like 5 billion different ways to describe a woman or man's appearance. Feather-like blonde hair and ice blue eyes and a smile so blinding that it could charge every Tesla from Brentwood to Beijing. Something strange that I'm starting to notice is every time I review an autobiography, I find myself sharing with you guys what makes it structurally different. Now, this one, aside from the author's voice or narration, which have their own engaging, friendly, and at times intense styles, it's kind of strange because instead of going chronologically, there are a lot of different flashbacks and flash forwards where he'll be like, "I will never have understood this until 31 years later when I had to take my daughter to the doctor and only my mother would have been able to tell me what the doctor was going to say." It moves from one period of time to the other and back, so he manages to stay focused. Every one of these flashbacks or time changes, they just further elaborate or maybe emphasize the veracity of his stories and the magnitude of his essence. The chapter John Bonham's Seance is the strangest chapter of the book. It reminded me of The War of Art by Steven Pressfield when he started talking about synesthesia and how he felt the speech when he listened to John Bonham play drums. Not many people who watch my channel know this, but I used to be like the biggest metalhead ever. And one of the first bands I got into was Led Zeppelin. My dad showed me them when I was 12 and I fell in love with their music. One of the reasons I say this is a strange chapter is that Grohl's appeal to, I think how he said, harnessing the power of the universe to achieve his greatest desire, it was proved as quite tangible here. In an almost undescribable way, as you could probably tell. Grohl had the chance to become the drummer of a band he loved called Scream. But to the dismay of his public school teaching mother, he had to leave school, putting further at risk the already strained relationship he had with his father, and also quitting the band that he already had made with like his 2 best friends. The next chapter, Sure I Wanna Be Your Dog, so that's who Iggy Pop is. I've heard that name so many times and I never looked it up or anything like that. He's the inventor of punk rock and the stage dive. He finally ended up joining Scream and it completely changed like the whole trajectory of his life, but there's something about joining something that you didn't start. You join a team that's already built a reputation and over time you can build a name for yourself within that reputation, and when the time comes, if you need to, you can leave. You do not have to build an empire from the first brick. You can join a team and contribute something that no one did, and you can contribute more than anyone else could. I mean, this guy isn't known for just one musical act, and he's also not known for just playing drums. I think he plays guitar and sings too. Life on the road for Grohl was so on the road. He basically moved from moving around every day with Scream to moving around every day with Nirvana. By the way, in case I didn't say it, and I love when people do this in their memoirs, Grohl has this type of like guidance or footnote adding prowess, like what Seth Rogen did in his memoir Yearbook, but with comedy, movies, and specials, where what Grohl does is he uses bands and lyrics and songs and albums to compare to different smells or days or emotions or lifestyles or periods of his life that he experienced. And what I love about this is a few things. One, I feel like this sounds like horrifically corny, but it paints your story with your passions. And two, it's a really individualistic way to help others digest your story. Lastly, three, anyone who doesn't care that much about punk music might check this book out and want to get more into punk music. I've never heard someone talk so much about why getting $400 from one musical gig was the most incredible thing ever. I'm sure it is. I still don't understand why the book's called The Storyteller. I mean, everyone's telling a bunch of stories in these books. Like, the chapter We Were Surrounded and There Was No Way Out focuses on Nirvana's getting used to large amounts of fame. It seems like that's just not easy for many musicians to get used to at all. So many people want that fame, but once you experience it, it's almost like it can change you and take you over if you do not have the sense of perspective or clarity to keep up with it. I can't say I know from experience, or at least yet, but based on what I've read and heard over the years, it makes sense. Might I add, Kurt Cobain, he sounded like his personality sounded like you would imagine it. Emotionally unpredictable to most people, in love with music, and very rebellious. Here's one part that stood out in the following chapter. It was almost as if I were in the outside looking in, watching this all happen to someone else at a distance, enjoying the benefits of making it without having to answer for it. That certainly could not be said for Kurt, whose face was now on the cover of every magazine, in every MTV news episode, his voice echoing on every FM radio station coast to coast, a life sentence that most are not prepared to navigate. I talked a little more about the chapter He's Gone in another video about this book that I'm going to be putting out. I'm going to talk about the takeaways that I got from this book. I'll try to drop a link to that in the description. It makes sense why the Foo Fighters was started later on. The heart of the decision regarding Grohl's part in it really sounds like it was inspired by Kurt's death. But it wasn't in this impulsive way. It was more of like a graceful one. Grohl didn't want to be that guy who just played drums in Nirvana. He wanted to be more. What would you have done? I mean, the show had to go on, right? The Foo Fighters had some member changes. There was a chapter where I think it's called Sweet Virginia, where Grohl spent maybe 10 to 15 minutes talking about their experience at Ozfest and how awkward it was. They weren't sure why they were there, and they weren't sure why everyone there knew the words to their songs. But for those people to know the words to their songs and Pantera's, it felt pretty good. Next, he talked about the births of his daughters and what it was like and why he named them what he named them. And I think it's pretty cool how their birthdays are they're only 2 days away from each other. It's also really weird to think, well, the president wants me to perform in Washington, but I don't exactly support his party. But my dad does. And my dad got to where he was by showing support for both parties. Somehow Grohl managed. If I didn't say this already, his narration is great. His impressions are very multi-dimensional. They don't sound like his voice really at all. And his personality is sincere, but it's introverted. And it's down to earth, but at some points, it can be a little dorky. It's super authentic. Later, he and John Paul Jones, Led Zeppelin bassist, started a supergroup called Them Crooked Vultures. This guy seems to love forming supergroups. It makes you think there are probably people out there who debate, what was the best band that involved Dave Grohl? Was it Nirvana? Was it the Foo Fighters? Was it Them Crooked Vultures? Was it Scream? A lot of us would say Nirvana, but Nirvana has had time to stand the test of time, so you still can't say that the other ones aren't pretty cool, at least. Led Zeppelin? That's gotta be some kind of an experiment. Here's an example of, I keep saying that he's geeking out and getting all excited and he's a dorky little dork man. Here's an example of him geeking out. When I compared that to Rogan, Dinner with AC/DC, the band that walks in the shadows never to be seen in public, only to appear on stages adorned with massive exploding cannons and giant amplifiers stacked to the rafters. The band that has personified fist-pumping, head-banging, foot-stomping bad boy boogie with an outlaw's grin and a devilish rink for over 40 years, not to mention selling over 200 million albums and inspiring generations of young rockers to devote their lives to 3 chords and a pair of ripped jeans? I should know, I was one of them. The chapter inspired yet again, I think this was the last chapter, was just stories of him working with and meeting all sorts of like famous people and musicians, and the rest of it was about that and his daughters. These really are tales of life and music. You're left with a guy who really openly shows his gratitude for what he has. And he's really lived. I mean, I can't imagine him experiencing all this and then being like, you know what, this isn't really enough for a memoir, I'll wait on it a few years. The little hints of spirituality here and there, the blessings, the seance, the universe at work, they make it seem like it's more than just life and music. It's either that or it goes to show you that the two can be redefined. Quotes. You are only as happy as your unhappiest child. I didn't exactly know who I was praying to, but I did know exactly what I was praying for. Success. If you want something from a musician, ask his girlfriend. It's not always the kid who fails the school, it's the school that fails the kid. It's one thing to meet a hero in passing, it's another when they become your friend. Direction 1. I recommend this book more for anyone who wants to be a big fan of Dave Grohl than anyone who already is. Anyone who already is might very well know plenty of this, but they might learn a thing or two from it as well. Direction 2. If you like this book, you very well might like Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey and Yearbooks by Seth Rogen. The Storyteller by Dave Grohl, there's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews of that and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe, but if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop a new video, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere and I will see you then.